My name is Otili. I am 31, and 3 weeks ago I had the kind of bachelorette party that ends engagements. I did not plan for it to go that far, and I definitely did not plan for someone in the room to record everything on their phone and send it straight to my fiancé's sister by accident. But that is exactly what happened. And by the time I woke up the next morning with champagne still sticky on my fingers and a stranger's cologne soaked into the collar of my blouse, the footage was already sitting in a group chat I did not even know existed, playing on a screen I could not reach. My fiancé, Callum Bryce, is 33, a civil engineer who designs bridges and drainage systems and talks about load-bearing walls at dinner with the same excitement most men reserve for playoff games. He proposed on a park bench 6 months ago with a speech he had rehearsed in the shower so many times I could mouth the words along with him. And I said yes because I loved him. And I meant it. But somewhere between the ring and the wedding planning, I started to feel like I was marrying a Tuesday, reliable and warm but completely free of surprise. My maid of honor, Sarah Polk, organized the Bachelorette at a Harbourview hotel suite that cost more than my rent, and I stood on the balcony at 9:45 p.m. with the salt and chlorine smell from the indoor pool drifting through the vents and told myself every bride deserves one electric night before the rest of her life begins. Then Sarah announced the surprise guest, and a man named Enzo Mares walked through the door carrying a portable speaker and a confidence that filled the room before the music even started. And 7 bridesmaids screamed, and the energy in that suite shifted from a girls' night to something I should have walked away from, but did not. Enzo set a chair in the center of the living room and pointed at me. The room chanted my name. I sat. His routine was close, deliberate, professional but intense, and when the song ended I was supposed to clap and laugh and let him leave, but I did not do that. Instead, I grabbed his wrist and pulled him toward the balcony, and the bridesmaids cheered like I had scored a goal, and he did not resist because I was the client, and the client was having fun. On the balcony, he leaned against the railing, and I leaned next to him, and the harbour lights stretched across the black water below us, and I told him about the wedding, and he laughed, and I laughed, and at some point I was sitting on his lap in the deck chair with his arm around my waist, while Sarah played our wedding first dance song on her phone as a joke, the same song Callum and I had chosen together on a Sunday afternoon 3 months ago, and I slow danced with a stranger to it, while someone inside took a Polaroid through the glass door and slapped a timestamp sticker on it reading 1:22 a.m. I did not see Noor Fakhri holding up her phone from the couch, recording a wide shot that captured the balcony, the dance, the way my forehead dropped against Enzo's neck like he was someone I had known for years instead of 45 minutes. I did not see anything except how alive I felt. And I told myself it was harmless because nothing technically happened, which is the lie people tell when they know exactly what happened but do not want to name it. I woke up at 6 on the sweet sofa with a dry mouth and Enzo's cologne still clinging to my collar, and the room smelled like stale champagne and cold pasta, and the chair from his routine was still sitting in the center of the floor like evidence no one had bothered to hide. I checked my phone, found 3 missed calls from Callum between 11 and midnight, and texted him a heart emoji, and the words fell asleep early because the truth required a version of myself I was not ready to be. In the lobby cafe, Sarah played me her voice memo, a giggly 4-minute ramble describing me and Enzo on the balcony, obsessed with each other, sitting on his lap to our wedding song, and I laughed so hard, coffee came through my nose, and told her to send it to the bridal group chat, and she tapped her screen without checking which of the 2 nearly identical chats she was sending it to, and the memo landed in the one that included Callum's sister Margot, a graphic designer with forensic attention to detail and zero tolerance for anyone who disrespected her brother. Callum called at 9:30 and asked how the night was, and I said fun, nothing crazy. He read me his 3 missed call timestamps in the flat, precise voice he used for bridge calculations, then said the rideshare app still shared our account, and my cab was booked at 4:47 a.m., and he asked me to explain the 5-hour gap between falling asleep early and a ride at dawn when my phone location showed the hotel balcony at 1:30 a.m. I told him the app glitched, that he sounded like my father, and hung up, because hanging up first always felt like winning even when I was running. At home, he sat on the balcony with coffee and offered one compromise, a conversation that evening where I walked him through the night while he listened without interrupting. And he said if I could give him that one honest talk, he would never mention the Bachelorette again. I told him nothing happened, that every bride deserves one free night, and walked past him into the bedroom, dropping my jacket on our shared bed, where he would smell Enzo's cologne 3 hours later when he lay down and turned his face into the pillow and went very still. By Monday, he sat on the bed, reading credit card charges, $87 at the hotel bar at 11:14 p.m., 142 for room service at 12:51 a.m., 161 at the bar again at 2:38 a.m., and he asked who the 8th drink was for when there were only 7 bridesmaids. I called him an accountant disguised as a fiancé and took my pillow to the living room. The next day, I mimicked his voice for my co-workers in the clinic break room until they laughed nervously, and Noor glanced at her phone, the one holding the full Bachelorette video, and said nothing. Tuesday evening on the balcony under the string lights, Callum asked 3 final questions. What time the party ended, whether the dancer stayed past midnight, and whether I would be comfortable watching any footage from that night right now, together, on this balcony. I told him the question itself proved he would never trust me, and carried both water glasses inside and let the door swing shut. And he sat alone in the yellow light and created a calendar entry that read, Harbour Street 10 a.m. for Thursday, and closed it without expression. That same night, Margot replayed the voice memo for the 4th time, paused it where Sarah described me slow dancing with the dancer to my own wedding song, and saved a screenshot to a folder she named Wedding. On Friday evening, our engagement celebration dinner took place at a riverside wine bar with exposed brick walls and tea candles floating in glass bowls down the centre of a long communal table set for 30. And I arrived in a green silk dress with Syrah on my arm and a cocktail already in my hand because I told myself the best way to fix tension is to perform happiness so convincingly that reality bends to match it. Callum sat at the far end of the table in a navy blazer with his jaw set in a way that only Margot noticed from across the room. And I told myself his mood was work stress, the kind that vanishes after 2 glasses of wine and a crowd of laughing friends. Halfway through dinner, Sarah tapped her glass and handed me the microphone for a toast. I stood and the room quieted, and I began by thanking everyone. And then I pivoted into what I called a funny story about falling in love with the most predictable man alive. I told 30 people that Callum had proposed on a park bench, not even a restaurant, but a bench, and that he had rehearsed his speech so many times I could hear him mumbling it through the bathroom door. The room laughed. I said I always knew what Callum was going to say before he said it, and then I paused for timing and added that my Bachelorette had reminded me what spontaneity feels like. Sarah whooped, 2 bridesmaids clapped, and Margot set down her fork and did not pick it up again. But I was not finished. I told the room that Callum had actually cried during the proposal, his voice cracking on the word, forever like a boy giving a book report, and 2 tables laughed while Margot's face went pale because she knew Callum had shared that detail with me in private, in bed, after the engagement, calling it the most vulnerable moment of his life. I turned that vulnerability into a punchline in front of every person who mattered to us, and I did not even slow down because the laughter sounded like applause, and applause sounded like proof that I was the interesting one in this relationship. Callum smiled, thin and controlled, the expression of a man counting backward from 10, and a guest near him later described that smile to Margot as one of the saddest things he had ever seen at a celebration. After the toast, I moved to the bar where the bartender was young and tattooed and pouring something amber. I leaned across the counter and complimented his technique and touched his forearm when he slid my drink over, and I laughed loudly enough for the table to hear, making sure Callum could see every gesture because some part of me wanted him to react, to fight, to prove he cared enough to be jealous, because his calm patience had started to feel like indifference, and I confused intensity with love. At 10:15 p.m., the party emptied and Callum waited by the exit. We walked to a park bench near the river where the water reflected bridge lights in broken orange lines, and he sat down and asked me to join him. He said the toast had hurt him, not the predictable jokes which he could handle, but the part where I told 30 people he cried during the proposal. He said that moment was private, something he shared in bed at 2 a.m., because he trusted me with the softest part of himself. And I turned it into a comedy bit for a room full of people who would remember his tears longer than they would remember his proposal. He pointed out the bartender's forearm touch at 9:47 p.m. and said 3 guests saw it. 1 photographed it for a story that was posted and deleted. And he was not jealous of a bartender but needed to understand why I consistently required an audience to feel something I could not feel when it was just the two of us. He asked me to explain what spontaneity I experienced at the Bachelorette that did not exist in our relationship, whether the dancer was part of it, and what Sarah's wink about the surprise guest actually meant. I crossed my arms and said the toast was a joke, and he was the only person in the room who did not laugh, that the crying story was funny because it was sweet and everyone knew it, and that spontaneity meant champagne and music and nothing more. I told him if he could not take a joke at his own engagement party, he was not ready for a marriage where people actually enjoy themselves, and I stood up and called a car and walked away with my heels striking the wet stone path while he stayed on that bench and opened his phone and listened to one section of Sarah's voice memo, the part where she said Ottilie was literally slow dancing with the dancer to her own wedding song. And then he closed the app and sat in the dark. On Sunday morning, I tried a different approach because the silence was making my skin crawl. I sat across from Callum at the kitchen table and lowered my voice and told him I had been thinking about the toast and that maybe it came out wrong. I said I did not mean to embarrass him, and I offered what I called an olive branch. I would write a beautiful post about him online, tag every guest from the engagement dinner, and publicly correct the record. But I had one condition. He had to stop asking about the Bachelorette, permanently. No more questions, no more credit card forensics, no more rideshare timestamps. I framed this as generosity, as the bigger person extending peace. Callum listened and then asked one question, whether the olive branch included telling him the full story of the Bachelorette just once, with nothing left out before the post went up. I stiffened and said the olive branch was the post, and not a confession because there was nothing to confess, and if he rejected this, then the ongoing tension was entirely his responsibility. He nodded slowly and said he was going for a run, and I told myself I had tried, and he had refused my peace, proving once again that he was the problem. But the olive branch failed in a way I did not anticipate. By offering to trade silence for a social media correction, I confirmed to Callum that I was negotiating around something I needed hidden, and that the thing I most feared was not losing him, but losing control of the story. He logged this shift in the brown notebook he now kept in the spare room, and when he came back from the run and showered, he picked up his phone and dismissed a calendar notification reading Elm Street 2:15 p.m. for Tuesday, and on the bathroom mirror the steam had cleared except for one streak where his hand rested, and he wiped it clean with deliberate precision. On Tuesday, Callum drove to Elm Street and was gone for 53 minutes and came home to find me watching reality television on the couch. I asked where he had been and he said errands, and I assumed he was planning a wedding surprise because in my version of events, his silence was devotion, not preparation. That evening, he separated the household mail into 2 stacks on the kitchen counter, moved his wallet and keys from the shared bowl by the front door to his briefcase in the spare room, and asked over dinner whether the electricity bill was in his name or mine. When I said I had no idea, he wrote something in the brown notebook and said nothing else, and I did not think about it again for days. The next morning, I called my mother Delphine from the clinic parking lot with the engine running and the air conditioning on high. I told her Callum had been interrogating me for over a week about the Bachelorette, reading credit card records and tracking rideshare times, and I added something new, something I had not said before. I told her Callum had screamed at me in front of our friends at the engagement dinner, that he had grabbed my arm outside the wine bar, and that I was afraid he was becoming someone I did not recognize. None of this was true. Callum had never raised his voice above a conversational tone and had never touched me in anger. But I needed my mother's fury, and the fastest way to get it was to give her a villain she could hate without asking questions. Delphine said she always knew quiet men were the dangerous ones, and she promised to call Theo and sort this out. On Sunday at the Bryce family back patio under a pergola wrapped in grapevines, Theo grilled chicken and corn for Callum, Margot, and his aunt Linda. I was invited but declined with a headache excuse, texting Callum to have fun with his family without me. Halfway through lunch, Theo set down his fork, and the metal clinked against ceramic with a small, precise sound that made everyone stop chewing. He said Delphine had told him at the grocery store that Callum was controlling and physically aggressive, and he listened without responding because the cereal aisle was not the place. Then he said he asked Margot what she knew, and Margot had played him the voice memo. Theo did not raise his voice. He said one thing, that in 40 years of marriage he never had to ask Callum's mother to explain a night away from him because she never gave him a reason to wonder, and he added that any woman who tells another family that their son is violent when he is not has revealed more about herself than about him. He said if I could not answer 3 honest questions 5 weeks before a wedding, the wedding was not the problem, the answers were. The table went silent. A wasp circled the corn platter. Margot looked down at her plate. Callum did not move. On Monday, Callum called my brother Rowan, who answered ready for a confrontation because I had told him Callum was stalking my phone and going through my messages. Callum listened to the entire speech without interrupting and then asked one question, whether Rowan had heard Sarah's voice memo from the Bachelorette night. Rowan said he did not know what that was. Callum said he would send it right now if Rowan wanted to hear what actually happened at 1 a.m. on the hotel balcony, and he could compare it to whatever version I had provided. Rowan went quiet for a long time and then said he needed to think and hung up. And 3 days later he still had not called me back, which I told myself meant he was busy. That evening, Callum and I sat in the living room with only the floor lamp casting a warm half-shadow across the rug. He said the wedding was 4 weeks away and families were spending money and friends were booking flights and vendors needed final confirmations by Friday. He said before any of that went forward, he needed one thing, a real answer about the Bachelorette, not a social media correction, not a toast apology, not a deflection. He said Sarah's voice memo, which he had heard in full, described a man on the balcony at 1 a.m., a slow dance to their wedding song, and physical closeness that Sarah documented with the giggling specificity of someone who thought it was entertainment. He said I had never once mentioned a man being at the party past midnight, had never said the name Enzo, and had never acknowledged that anything requiring explanation occurred on that balcony. He held up his phone without playing it and asked me one question. If he pressed play right now, would my version of the night still hold up? Or would I prefer to change my story before the memo did it for me? I shifted tactics. I lowered my voice and uncrossed my arms and told him I understood his pain and that I respected his feelings. I said the memo was Sarah being dramatic and drunk, not a documentary, and I offered to call Sarah right now and have her clarify what she meant, framing myself as the calm and reasonable adult in the room. But I did not answer a single question. I did not say Enzo's name. I did not explain the balcony, or the slow dance, or the wedding song. Callum watched me and asked whether clarify meant Sarah would change her story or tell the real one. The mask cracked. I told him I would not be cross-examined in my own living room by a man who could not handle the idea that his fiancé had one fun night without his supervision, and I grabbed my car keys and the door closed behind me. Callum texted me 30 minutes later while I sat at my mother's kitchen table. He said he would not chase me, that he had asked fair questions and received nothing, and that the vendor deadline was Friday, and he would not confirm a single payment until we had a real conversation. I screenshotted the text and sent it to the bridal group chat, calling him threatening and manipulative, and 6 angry emojis came back while Sarah said he was spiraling, and Noor, for the 3rd time in 2 weeks, sent absolutely nothing. The next morning, Margot drove to Delphine's front porch and rang the bell at 11. Delphine opened the door in a bathrobe, and Margot did not argue or accuse, but simply held up her phone and played 30 seconds of Syrah's voice memo. The section describing me on the balcony, on Enzo's lap, dancing to my own wedding song while Syrah laughed about how I forgot I had a whole fiancé at home. Delphine gripped the porch railing where the white paint peeled under her fingers and asked Margot to play it again. And Margot played it again. And then Delphine said thank you for coming and closed the door, and through the frosted glass Margot watched her sit down on the hallway bench and cover her face. That night Callum moved his pillow, his charger, 3 dress shirts, and the brown notebook into the spare room and sat at the IKEA desk he had built 2 years ago. He opened his phone and cancelled the autopay for 3 joint streaming subscriptions, totaling $41 a month, switching one to his personal card and deleting the other 2 entirely. He logged the cancellation dates in the notebook beside a handwritten list that now ran 2 pages long. The radiator ticked once in the wall, a metallic, irregular rhythm, and I did not notice the cancelled subscriptions for 9 days. Thursday morning, Callum entered the co-working space near his office, where the lobby smelled like fresh paint and espresso, and he sat in a soundproof glass phone booth with his brown notebook on the small shelf and made 3 calls in 37 minutes, checking items off with a mechanical pencil while freelancers outside could see his mouth moving but hear nothing. When he returned home that evening, he ate standing at the kitchen counter, loaded the dishwasher without being asked, separated the mail, and paused at the spare room door to ask me through the hallway whether I had thought about what I wanted to say before Friday's vendor deadline. I said there was nothing to say, the deposits were paid, the wedding was happening, and his silence was his problem to fix, not mine. He nodded once and closed the door, and the brass latch sound seemed to hang in the tile hallway longer than physics should have allowed. That afternoon, he met Margot at the cafe below the co-working space, corner table, windows streaked with condensation, and she walked him through the completed timeline on her tablet. Voice memo with transcript, Instagram timestamps, credit card charges, rideshare receipt, Polaroid mention, engagement toast recording where I exposed his private tears to 30 people, and the screenshot of my text to the bridal chat calling him manipulative. She said Noor leaving the group chat was significant because it meant Noor understood the video was a liability, and Callum opened the brown notebook and showed Margot the back cover where a printed list of every wedding vendor was taped flat, phone numbers and contract terms and cancellation deadlines in his engineer's handwriting. Margot asked if he had decided, and he said he decided on the park bench by the river 10 days ago, but needed the timeline to be airtight first because he only wanted to do this once. The cafe espresso machine hissed with a sharp burst of steam. Thursday night, I was leaning against the kitchen counter eating yogurt from a glass jar with a long spoon when Callum entered from the spare room and stood near the doorway with a stillness that was different from every conversation before. Not tense and not angry, but settled. Like a man who had already crossed a bridge and was looking back at the other side without wanting to return to it. He said this was his last attempt to have this conversation. He said over 2 weeks he had asked me 7 times to explain the Bachelorette, and each time I had deflected or mocked or blamed or walked away. He said he had never raised his voice, never gone through my phone, never contacted my friends without telling me, and had shared the voice memo only with Margot and his father because both came to him first. He said he played fair. He made one final offer. Sit with him for 15 minutes right now, tell the complete truth about what happened with the dancer on the hotel balcony. explain the Polaroid with the 1:22 a.m. timestamp, and acknowledge the slow dance to their wedding song that Sarah had described in detail. If my answer was honest, they would go to the vendor appointment together Saturday morning and confirm everything. 15 minutes of truth for a lifetime of marriage. He asked one specific question. If the dancer was a harmless performer who left before midnight, as I had always implied, then why did Sarah's voice memo, recorded well after midnight, describe me sitting on the dancer's lap and slow dancing to our wedding first dance song at 1 a.m.? And why had I never once in 2 weeks spoken the name Enzo or acknowledged that any man was present on that balcony at all? The refrigerator compressor cycled on with a low vibration I could feel through the tile beneath my bare feet. I set down the yogurt jar and did not answer for a long time, and when I finally spoke, I said I was done being managed. I said the wedding was happening with or without his paranoia, and that if he wanted to cancel, he could be the one to explain to 200 guests why everything fell apart over a drunken party rumor from a friend who could barely stand when she recorded it. I called his offer manipulative and said real love does not come with conditions and ultimatums delivered in kitchens at 10 o'clock at night. I walked past him close enough that my shoulder nearly grazed his, and the yogurt jar stayed on the counter with the spoon balanced on the rim like a small white flag neither of us acknowledged. Callum did not follow me. He rinsed the jar and placed it in the recycling bin and then said out loud, not shouting but loud enough for me to hear from the hallway, that he was going to handle things properly. He said it once, the way someone confirms a reservation they have already made. Friday morning at 8:17 a.m., I sat at the kitchen table with my phone and decided the only way to force Callum's hand was to make the social cost of cancelling the wedding higher than the cost of attending it. I opened a new group message and added 41 recipients. Extended family on both sides, mutual friends, 3 of Callum's co-workers, and Lena Marsh, the couple's therapist in our friend group. I wrote a long message saying Callum had been emotionally withdrawing from the wedding because of baseless jealousy, that he had screamed at me in public, that he was tracking my location without my consent, and that he was now threatening to cancel vendors as punishment. I wrote that I needed our community to help him see this was not normal behaviour and that a bride should not have to beg her groom to show up. I hit send, and 41 phones buzzed, and I told myself I had won the room for the last time. I did not know that Lena screenshotted the entire message and sent it to Callum with a note saying she had worked with couples in crisis for 9 years, and what I described as Callum's behaviour was textbook for what an abuser claims, not what a calm man does, and she wanted him to know she would be a witness to anything he needed. I did not know that one of Callum's co-workers forwarded the message to their shared manager asking if Callum needed support, and the manager called Callum personally to check on him. And I did not know that Noor Fakhri, who had been silent for days, saw my 41-person message full of lies about a man she had watched sit quietly while I danced with another man to his own wedding song, and something in her snapped. She opened the group chat called Bridal and Bryce's, the one with Margot in it, and uploaded the full Bachelorette video with one line of text. Everyone should see this before they pick a side. By Friday night, the video had been viewed by every member of that chat. Rowan watched it in his car in the driveway and did not come inside for 20 minutes. Delphine watched it on her hallway bench, the same bench where she had heard the voice memo, and this time she did not ask to see it again. Sarah called me in a panic saying Noor had posted the actual video and it showed everything: the balcony, the lap, the slow dance, my forehead against Enzo's neck, and I finally understood that the thing I thought was a private night between friends had been public since the moment someone pressed record. Callum read my group message in the co-working phone booth and did not reply to the thread. He opened the brown notebook, turned to the last page, wrote one sentence, and saved a screenshot of the message to the cloud folder. He texted Margot, Saturday, 10 a.m., venue coordinator's office, and then he walked to the cafe window and drank a black coffee standing up, watching rain streak down the glass while parking meters glinted under the streetlights. I spent Friday night in the apartment alone. The spare room was empty, Callum's briefcase gone, his car absent from the parking spot. He texted that he was staying at Margot's and would see me at the venue at 10. I lay in bed with the lights on, staring at the ceiling fan casting thin, sweeping shadows across the white plaster. And at 7:45 Saturday morning, I got dressed and checked my phone and found a synced calendar reminder, reading venue, 10 a.m., final with one line in the notes, bring all original contracts. The contracts were in the brown notebook in the spare room. The spare room door was locked. I tried the handle and it did not turn, and the hallway was perfectly still with morning light making a pale rectangle on the floor that I stood just outside of. The wedding venue was a converted textile mill with exposed steel beams and tall windows, and the coordinator's office on the second floor had a glass desk, 2 potted ferns, and an entire wall of framed photos of happy couples on their wedding days, every single one of them smiling in a way that now felt like mockery. Patricia, the coordinator, sat with her tablet and 3 labelled folders, and Callum was already in the chair by the window when I arrived 4 minutes late in a cream blouse and the confidence of a woman who believed she could talk her way through anything because it had always worked before. Patricia asked if we were ready to finalise, and Callum said he appreciated her time, and then he said the wedding was cancelled. He opened the brown notebook to a tabbed section and read everything in order: voice memo transcript, credit card timestamps, rideshare receipt, Instagram story at 2:14 a.m., engagement toast recording, and the screenshotted group message I had sent to 41 people accusing him of violence that never happened. He read each item without raising his voice, and I tried to interrupt twice, but Patricia held up one finger with the practiced patience of a woman who had seen weddings collapse before. And the worst part was not the evidence itself, but the way Patricia's eyes moved between Callum's notebook and my face with the flat, professional neutrality of someone who would forget my name by next Tuesday. I said it was a misunderstanding and that Callum was having a breakdown, but he simply asked Patricia to check her email for the cancellation notice he submitted at 6:14 a.m. that morning. She confirmed it was valid under the 30-day clause, with the refund going to Callum's personal account since he had paid the full deposit from his own savings. I said I had not agreed to any cancellation, and Patricia explained calmly that the contract allowed either party to initiate with written notice and a documented reason, and Callum's documented reason ran 6 pages long. He slid a sealed envelope across the glass desk and asked Patricia to note the time, and she typed 10:31 a.m. into her tablet with the same precision she probably used for seating charts. Inside was a letter on attorney letterhead containing a petition for dissolution of the engagement and recovery of all premarital financial contributions totaling $23,400, a demand for mediation within 14 days, and an evidence preservation notice listing every timestamp, every recording, every screenshot, and every witness statement as protected materials relevant to any future dispute. The letter was dated Wednesday, 2 full days before his final offer of 15 minutes of truth in our kitchen on Thursday night, which meant the attorney had already prepared everything while Callum stood in my doorway one last time asking me to be honest. And I chose performance over truth because I did not believe a quiet man who designed bridges and talked about load-bearing walls would ever follow through on something this precise and this permanent. I was wrong about the bridges, and I was wrong about the man who built them, and the envelope in my hands weighed almost nothing but contained the complete and irreversible end of the life I had spent 6 months building on a foundation I never bothered to check.